Hello, everyone. So welcome to how to communicate effectively with your lover. And it's round 2 of lockdown by the looks of it, isn't it, Vineyard? By the looks.
Oh, Bridget, tell me about it. So, yes, level 3 here in Auckland for us. We'll see what the update says today, but it looks like it's round 2 of lockdown.
So communication is going to be especially important for people during this period. I mean, we may be in lockdown for a couple of weeks or 4 weeks, who knows? But, I find myself this morning trying to talk to clients on Zoom, and lo and behold, there's children screaming in the background, So, communication is going to be key for everybody moving forward, isn't it, really? And just really digging in and focusing on what we need to do to get through it.
Yeah, that's right. And we're talking about communication this morning, but I think it's quite timely because we actually had this booked in months ago.
We did.
And we were going to talk about communication, but I think it's quite fitting because only a day ago we moved into a new a change for a lot of people, and I think something that's come up for me at least was this whole thing about frustration. And so before we jump into communication, I'd actually like to talk a bit about frustrations with the reality and what we're dealing with, and then maybe how does that play into communication? Where is your frustration levels at the moment, or this morning when we heard the announcement, Bridget? Let's be honest here, please. 0 to 10, where was your frustration levels?
I think because this is not the first rodeo, my stress and my frustrations were probably lower than the first time, because you know what to expect now. And I think the issue is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But absolutely, the frustrations this morning, probably, especially with my children screaming in the background when I'm trying to speak to clients. So that would have been at about an 8, I've got to say. So,
well, there you go. Okay.
That's right. And I've got to make sure that rather than being aggressive in terms of my approach with my children, I need to be assertive. So I'll talk about that more during this Facebook Live. But that certainly did test me this morning,
Yeah.
What about you?
And I'll be honest with you, this morning for me, I'll be honest, this morning for me, the frustration levels were probably at about a 9 out of 10. I think we're in a good space right now, so that's awesome. But what I realized this morning was sometimes you cannot really change the situation. The only thing you can change and the only thing you can manage is your approach or your attitude towards the situation. And sometimes the only thing we need to do is to do the next right thing. And the next right thing is often not taking out your frustrations on your partner. But for me this morning, the next right thing was to tidy up my room.
Well, I think you've done very well. If you were like that this morning and now you've jumped on at midday, and I would have thought that your frustrations were at about a 2. So well done in terms of being able to move that from a negative place into a positive.
Yes, and it's funny. You talk about.
Oh, I think we've lost you. Have we lost you? I think that we have lost Vineyard for the minute. So I will talk about. Can you hear me, Vineyard? No, I don't think he can hear him. Okay, well, it's just me for the minute. So what we will do is we will talk about a communication tool that is really, really important.
Anyway, lost you for a moment there.
We did. So we did lose you, but you're back. So, and he's gone again. So what we'll do is in terms of communication, there's some tools that I use with my clients, which works for people that are together in love, and also for people who are trying to communicate with their ex-partners if they've been through a divorce or a separation. So the aggressive approach is used a lot by people in terms of trying to communicate with each other. And what people actually are likely to think when you're using the aggressive approach is something along these lines. I get what I want at the expense of the other person by dominating or hurting them emotionally or physically. So that aggressive approach, we've all been in situations where we have been aggressive when we could instead say, instead you need to see things differently. You need to say something like, I see that differently. It sounds like you think X, Y, Z, and I think this. So I see your point, and here is how I see the situation. Can we agree to disagree? So that's really pertinent. So that's the aggressive approach. And then the passive approach, which a lot of us use as well when we're dealing with each other. And that could be anything from, just agreeing with someone so you don't actually end up getting in an argument with them. So it's along the lines of, and the thinking behind you being passive really focuses on, I allow others to get what they want at my expense by choosing not to act or express my feelings or needs. And there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of frustration in terms of that when you're going through that. So you're likely to think like that, and instead of saying it's okay, I'll go along with what you want, though I don't really agree with it, you should say, I would much rather do this if that's okay with you, or for me it would work better if X, Y, Z, or here's what I would like to suggest in terms of the situation that we're going through. You could say something like, it's not going to work for me. I need to take a pass this time. I don't agree with what you're saying. So let's beg to differ and maybe talk about that later, or this is how I see things from my point of view. The most constructive way, excuse me a second. Can you guys be quiet, please? Sorry, I've got my children here yapping in the background. And I said, Mum's on a Facebook Live, so shh. Thank you. The joys of being in lockdown, hey? So the assertive approach absolutely is the way to go. If you can utilize this. Vineyard's joining us back again. So I will just keep continuing to talk about, hi, you're back again. I'm just finishing talking about the assertive approach. So the approach that you want to take in terms of communicating with your partner or your ex is being assertive. So it really is saying, I respect my needs and my thoughts and my feelings, and express them when showing respect towards others. So that is the basis of having the assertive approach when you're communicating. Instead of saying, instead of, the passive or the aggressive approach. So you want to say, I know you didn't mean any disrespect, but that is how it felt to me. Anyway, please stop. Or you could say something along the lines of, I noticed, I wonder, I see your point. Would you be willing to do X, Y, Z? So the assertive approach absolutely is the way to go, rather than being passive or aggressive, or actually being passive aggressive. So Vineyard is still trying to get online. So we are going to now talk about tips that will ensure that you've got better communication with your spouse. And the first one is find the right time. If you're finding you're having communication issues, find a time that's going to work for both of you, where you're not distracted or stressed or in a rush, and schedule a time to talk together. So it's really important that instead of using other communication platforms like text or email or letters, actually talk face to face with each other, because as all of you know, and all of us have been there, communication can be misinterpreted when you're using a text. Someone might think something when they say something, but then the receiver of that text actually has a completely different viewpoint. So talking in person is really imperative, really important that you do that. So don't attack your partner, all right? So we can, even if we don't mean it, we can actually sometimes come across as really harsh. So instead of being like that, use we or I. So, for example, say, I feel like we haven't been as close lately, okay? I feel like we haven't been as close lately, instead of you have been distant with me. So can you see the difference in terms of that communication? There certainly is quite a harsh aspect when you're using you have been distant with me, right? Is that third time lucky, Vineyard, that you've joined us? Another aspect is to be, are you back there? Can we hear you? No, it's still not there. And another aspect in terms of communication is being honest. You've got to be upfront and honest. Sometimes the truth does hurt, but it's the key. It's an absolute key to a healthy relationship. So admitting that you aren't always perfect, and let's face it, nobody is perfect, and apologize for making a mistake instead of making excuses. It'll make you feel better, and it will absolutely in the long term help strengthen your relationship. A big thing is checking your body language. So if you've got your arms crossed and not willing to engage, that's a sure sign that things aren't going to move positively along in terms of your relationship and your communication. So make sure you sit up and face them and make eye contact when you're speaking. Make sure you're not doing this, and make sure you're not fiddling on your phone or you're distracted by something else, because that really isn't creating a great environment for you to both work on issues that you may have. Show your partner that you respect them by listening and responding to what they have to say, and that all comes back to your body language. Now, using the 48-hour rule. So if your partner does something that makes you angry, you need to tell them about it. But when you're in that height of feeling hurt about what was said, you don't have to do it right away. So if you're still hurt 48 hours later, say something. And if you don't, consider not bringing it up. But remembering that your partner can't actually read your mind. So if you don't speak up when you're upset, there's no way for them to apologize or change, because they can't read your mind. No one's got ESP. Once you do mention your hurt feelings to your partner, and they sincerely apologize, just let it go. Don't bring up past issues if they're not relevant. I see in a lot of relationships that people, whether they're together or whether they're separated, can't let go of things. You really need to be able to move on and let go from, an argument you had 3 years ago. It's not relevant. Don't look back, but look forward. That really needs to happen. So now, if you're going to communicate when you're angry, which all of us do, obviously, usually in a really detrimental way, you've got to resolve the conflict in a healthy and a positive way. So if you do get really angry about something, just stop. Okay, so stop and take a breath and tell your partner that you need to take a short break before you continue the conversation. So whether that's you go and count to 10 or 100, whatever you need to do, or walk out of the room and give yourself some time to calm down. That's really, really important. Go for a walk, have a bath and some Epsom salt, something that's going to calm you down. And because taking a break can absolutely keep the situation from getting worse, from escalating the conflict. And the last thing you want to do is escalate the conflict. You actually want to minimize the conflict. Vineyard, are you back with us?
I'm back. Can you believe it? Good on you. That's been 14 minutes just going on. I'm sure you've been providing some excellent content. Sorry I missed all of that.
That's all right. No, all good. So I will stop where I was because they've listened to 14 minutes of me, as you say. So let's talk about the communication cinema that you want to talk about.
Okay. Thanks, Bridget. And yeah, I'm here. Can you? I hope you can hear me. So I guess when it comes to communication, and maybe you've touched on this when I was offline now, but the frustration that you're dealing with right now, you can either choose to, I guess, through communication, deal with that frustration, or you could take it out on your partner. Okay. But when I think about effective communication, it helps me. You see, I'm a visual person. I'm a visual learner. I often have to see something or get an image of something to help me understand it. And so a model that's been extremely helpful for me was just this idea of a communication cinema. If you think of a cinema, you've got two elements present, right? At the front of the theater, you have a
screen.
A screen.
Yes.
And at the back of the theater, you have a projector.
That's right.
And so unless you, there we go. The connection's still a bit choppy, so it took a while to get to a response. I'm going to keep going. So you have a screen in the front of the theater and a projector at the back, and the projector actually shines a light. It displays it shines an image. It sends a message, and then the screen. The job of that screen is to reflect the message back. Now, if you've got two projectors in a room trying to project an image, well, you won't have any image, right?
No.
If you have a projector and you have a screen, you end up with a good story, hopefully, if the message was good. But much like a cinema, if you don't have these aspects right, if you don't get it right, there will be no experience of a good story or good communication. Now, practically in our relationships and in any level of relationship, whether it be between a married couple or maybe even between work colleagues, unless you actively play the role of either the projector, the one talking, the one sending clear messages, or the screen, the one reflecting, the one playing back those messages. Active listening is another term we use. Unless you have both those elements, good communication won't occur. If you have both those elements, then you have a success story. Okay. So what does that look like practically? So with, some of our listeners might be familiar with the term I messages. So we want to send I statements that talk about me, not about you, in the sense that when I'm frustrated, I won't say, you frustrate me. I turn that around and say, I feel frustrated when this happens. So a good message actually identifies, hey, this is my frustration. It's my frustration I need to deal with. And yes, maybe you've helped bring about that frustration, but actually I need to own that. And in good conversation, when I send a good I message, say, hey, I'm frustrated when you don't tidy up the room. It's actually just it's not attacking the person, but it's owning your emotion, and it's defining when the frustration occurs. And then the last part you can add there would be, I really need to feel a sense of environmental well-being in our home. Okay, so by the room not being tidy, I don't have a sense of environmental well-being, and hey, we can actually do something about that. But if I make the message about my frustration and the fact that, hey, this is mine to deal with. This morning, for example, yes, that was I guess that wasn't. I just use it as an example, but I won't put that on Al Ray. It was partly my mess that that I cleaned up this morning. But the reality is if our communication becomes a way for us to tell a story, and if we realize as partners our job is to listen well when it's not our turn to speak. And
Absolutely.
when it is our turn to speak, our job is to send clear messages and not attack the other person.
And that's coming back to being respectful, isn't it? By listening.
So our connection is a bit choppy.
Oh, is it? Okay. Okay.
Our connection is a bit choppy, so I'll just pause for a moment and what you have to say about
that? With doing the iMessages, it shows your partner that you're respecting them by this active listening and responding. It's really, really, really important. No, that's fantastic. I was just going to finish up on a couple of things that I'd start talking about how people need to communicate when they're angry. And I talked about stopping and taking a breath, and perhaps walking away from the situation and coming back to it. So the second thing I talked about was that I will talk about is thinking. So after you are no longer upset, actually sit for a while and think about the situation and why you got so angry. Was it you that did something, or did your partner speak to you in a way that wasn't appropriate? Figure out what the real problem was and think about how to explain your feelings to your partner. I think it's really quite important. If you can spend a little bit of time reflecting on that, I think that's really good. One of the biggest things with communication is talking, isn't it? Instead of texting. Tell your partner and talk to them about it. And that's really important, that you talk it out without the animosity, without the passive or aggressive approach, but being assertive with each other. And listening, as you've talked about, active listening. So tell your partner how you feel. Remember to stop talking, not your turn to talk, zip it up, and listen to what they have to say and really be present and listen, rather than that child's doing that, or I can't, so making sure that you actually are doing that where you've got no distractions, if you possibly can do that, even for 5 minutes. I mean, you both deserve the opportunity, and you would agree, Vanyard, to express how they feel in a safe and healthy environment, which, if you can get the communication right in your relationship, that's more than half the battle. Relationships are based on communication, aren't they? And they really are. And if you can do that respectfully, there will be times when you aren't able to do that. Your stress levels might be sky high. There'll be people going through this at the moment, won't there, Vanya? There'll be people who are very stressed about the scenario that we find ourselves in once again in New Zealand. So if you can take those tips, I highly recommend it, because it will certainly ensure that when you're in lockdown, assuming we go into lockdown, which I think we're all thinking that that's going to happen, it's going to make for a more positive and easier time for everybody. Would you agree?
Yes, Bridget. I think this is quite fitting, our conversation today, and the fact that we've had some connection issues. It's quite funny, because it's often not too dissimilar in a relationship. It's not that I don't have something to say. My connection was just bad. It's not that you don't have something to say, or it's not that you're not responding. There's just been a delay in our connection. So I'm talking and I know you're responding, but there's a delay in the connection. And how often is that true in our communication in relationships? there's that delay. And sometimes the best thing we can do when we start getting frustrated because we feel like we're not being heard, or we don't understand our partner, sometimes we just need to pause. I think you mentioned this, but sometimes we just need to stop. And that's what I did on our conversation this morning. I know there's a lag, so I stopped, and eventually I could hear you respond, which is just technology playing up, really. But often just taking a pause, just calm down and pick up the conversation again at the next point where you're able to connect. A big key ingredient there would be believing the best about the other person. On our conversation this morning, like, we're here, we're both on this live, we're ready to hopefully provide good content to our listeners about communication. So that's my intention. I want to deliver as much useful tools as I can, and I'm sure that's your intention too. So if there's a communication breakdown, it doesn't mean our intentions have changed. It means there's been a breakdown in communication and technology. Now, it's the same in relationships. If you're missing each other relationally, it doesn't necessarily mean the other person's intentions are bad. They're not out to get you. If we can start believing the best about someone else and truly listen to understand, not listen to respond, listen to actually see, hey, what's going on for you, right? I know you've got the best intention, but I'm going to try and understand what's going on for you, and then we can respond. And that's probably my big takeaway for today is, if you think about the communication cinema, it's easy to project, it's easy to send messages. Okay, we can work on sending good messages, clear messages, but the biggest thing you can actually do to improve your communication today is imagine you're the screen. Imagine your biggest job is to reflect back the message that they're saying. Like, for example, hey, Bridget, I hear you say that we need to, not be passive aggressive communicators. Or, hey, I hear you say that, use my example from this morning, I hear you say that you get frustrated when the room is untidy and you need environmental well-being. So, I mean, if we start training ourselves to be that active listening partner, that screen, I think there's hope for our relationships.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all got, no one is perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. And I think if we can really all work on our communication, it will ensure that we've got great relationships, not just with our partners, but also with our ex-partners, and our wider family and friends. Absolutely. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're sorry about the communication issues that we've had. Well, the communication issues we've had. Yes, we have had communication issues, haven't we? But we got there. But we should, if we're going to be at home and your room's going to be tidy, Vineyard, we should perhaps do another Facebook Live next week so we can talk more about communication, since we weren't able to.
Well, there we go. Well, let's keep the conversation going, and hopefully it's been helpful. So I guess if anyone listening to the live today wanted to connect, so I'm with Family Life New Zealand, and frustration for us, lockdown. We had a one-day seminar booked this Saturday. There were 60 couples registered in Tauranga that was going to attend. So unfortunately, we can't go out there. We're just stuck in Auckland, and so we were really looking forward to going and adding value there. Unfortunately, that isn't happening. But the great thing is we have been working really hard this year to get our digital resources out there. And so if people want to check out more, they can also go and find us at familylife.nz and check out the podcast that's available. And again, putting out inspiring conversations to bring hope and strengthen relationships. Because ultimately, we believe when people develop effective relationship skills, their relationships flourish. And isn't that what we want?
Yeah, it's like that plant analogy, isn't it? They flourish and they grow because they're being watered and they've been fed and nurtured, isn't it?
Exactly.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we will look forward to chatting to you again very soon. Bye now.
Bye.